Hey, my name is Emma Matthew and I'm 35. I'm sitting in my new home office this morning. Sunlight pouring in through the big windows, warming the room while I fire up my laptop. Another day, another chance to grow the business I built from scratch, the same business that now brings in 6 figures a year. And yet, my mind drifts back. It's been exactly 1 year since that dinner. The night that changed everything between me and Michael. I remember standing at the dining table, carefully placing his mom's favorite apple pie in front of her, my way of being thoughtful. We'd been married 8 years. And then, out of nowhere, he looked at her and said something I'll never forget. Sarah's pretty much useless when it comes to money. All she ever does is spend, never earns. Then they laughed. Both of them. Like it was some inside joke. Like I was the joke. I stood there holding dessert plates, completely frozen. I can still feel my face burning, the sting of shame in my chest, and my hands shaking as I slowly walked away and excused myself. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, staring at the woman in the mirror, asking myself, how did I end up here? How did I become someone they could laugh at so easily? You know what's wild? That night, that deep, aching humiliation ended up lighting a fire in me I didn't even know I had. Fast forward to today. I just reviewed my firm's quarterly earnings and I had to laugh. Last month, I paid off Michael's business debt, every last dollar of it. $87,000, gone with one transfer from my account. His face when he found out. Oh, it was something. That same useless wife had just saved him financially. There's a kind of poetry in that, isn't there? People love to say that success is the best revenge. But I think they're missing the point. Success isn't about proving someone wrong, it's about finally being free. Free to choose, to grow, to never let anyone else define your worth again. And now, as I sip my coffee and scroll through a packed inbox full of client requests, I can honestly say being underestimated might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. It gave me the drive to become the woman I am now. Michael and I met back in college sophomore year at Northeastern. We were both broke, hungry for success, chasing big business dreams. I still remember spotting him for the first time in our Econ 2011 class. It's funny how things start, isn't it? He had this kind of confidence that just pulled you in, the way he challenged our professor during that lecture on market trends. Honestly, it was bold but also kind of magnetic. His brain worked differently and I noticed. So when we got paired up for a semester-long project, the connection felt instant. What started as late nights in the library quickly turned into dinner dates. And before we knew it, we were basically inseparable. We'd stay up until sunrise talking about the business empire we were going to build together someday. It wasn't just love, it felt like purpose. We both graduated with honors and landed entry-level jobs at rival consulting firms in Boston. Those early years were a blur in the best way. Two young professionals chasing big dreams, racing home to share wins, setbacks, wild ideas, all of it. We were each other's biggest cheerleaders, strategizing our next career moves like teammates. When Michael got his first big promotion before I did, I was genuinely proud. He had this natural way of leading people, it made sense. And as his job got more demanding with all the travel and late nights, we made a joint decision. I'd scale back on work a bit so one of us could hold down the fort at home. Just seemed practical. His salary was higher, and we figured it would give us space to start thinking about a family. But when I look back now, I'm not sure when the shift began. Maybe it was that dinner with his mom, Eleanor. She asked me some oddly sharp questions, like she didn't really approve of the choices I'd made. I remember her sipping wine and saying, "A modern woman shouldn't have to choose, should she?" With this glance at Michael I would come to recognize too well. 6 months later at our wedding, I overheard her in the bathroom talking to Michael's aunt. She said he could have married a real career woman. Someone on his level. I let it slide, blaming wedding day stress and overprotectiveness. When we bought our first home in a quiet little suburb outside Boston, I poured everything into it. I picked out the tiles, the lights, the furniture, every tiny detail. Michael's career kept rising, and I started dabbling in side gigs from home. Just small things to feel productive and creative while still holding things together on the home front. It all started with a little blog about home design, nothing fancy. Just a creative outlet that slowly found its audience. Then came my Etsy shop, where I sold hand-painted greeting cards. Each sale felt like a tiny win, something I was genuinely proud of. But every time I shared that excitement with Michael, he'd just give me this polite smile, the kind that looks warm on the surface, but never really reaches the eyes. "That's cute, honey," he'd say, before jumping into a full breakdown of his latest client win or some big move at work. First I brushed it off, but over time it started to sting. His career wins were important. Mine, just hobbies. And as the years passed, that dynamic didn't change, it deepened. I watched the man I fell in love with my equal slowly turn into someone who looked at me more and more like his mom did. Not as a partner but as part of the scenery. Pretty, supportive, decorative. 3 years into our marriage, his mom, Ella Lehner, decided to visit for a week. She wanted to celebrate Michael's big promotion to senior management. I poured my heart into getting everything ready, not just for her, but because I hoped deep down that this time she'd see me. Really see me. I cleaned every inch of the guest room, filled it with her favorite books, fresh flowers. I planned meals down to the smallest detail, took cooking classes, read up on her food preferences, made sure everything was perfect. I wanted her to feel special. I wanted to feel like I was enough. The night of the big dinner, I went all out. 4 courses, including a perfectly cooked filet mignon. Michael even opened a fancy bottle of Cabernet. We sat down, and she glanced around with that same distant look she always had, calm, composed, hard to read. As she swirled her wine, she looked at Michael and said, "So this promotion must come with a nice salary bump. Maybe now you two can hire real help so Sarah isn't just puttering around this big house all day." Michael laughed the way he used to when something truly made him happy. "Mom's not wrong," he said. "Maybe you could find something more productive to do, babe." I tried to hold my ground, gently steering the conversation toward something I was proud of. "Actually," I said, "my online shop's been doing really well. I sold 15 custom pieces just last month." I barely finished the sentence before Ella Lehner chimed in. "Oh, crafts are lovely, dear. My bridge partner's daughter does something similar. It keeps her busy while her husband handles the real work." Michael nodded, smiling. "Yeah, Sarah's great with the little things. The home stuff." And in that moment it hit me like a quiet wave. In their eyes I wasn't building something real. I was just playing house. The way they kept exchanging those knowing looks across the dinner table, it felt like I was on the outside of some exclusive club I'd never been invited to. "Real women figure out how to balance work and family," Eleanor said, smiling sweetly as she rested her hand on Michael's. "I worked full-time while raising Michael, after all. But I guess not everyone has that kind of drive." I stared down at my plate, carefully cutting my food into tiny, perfect bites, doing everything I could to keep my hands from shaking. They talked about me like I wasn't even there, like I was just invisible. When I got up to grab dessert, I barely made it to the bathroom before the tears came, hot, fast, and humiliating. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had I become someone so easy to disregard? So small? So silent? I splashed cold water on my face, fixed my makeup, and went back out with dessert and the fakest smile I could manage. Later that night, once Eleanor had gone off to bed, I finally said something. I kept my voice low, careful not to let her hear. "You made me feel 2 inches tall tonight," I whispered to Michael. He let out a sigh, the kind you'd give a kid who doesn't understand the world yet. "You're being too sensitive," he said. "Mom just wants what's best. She worked hard her whole life, it's hard for her to understand your choices." That was his version of an apology. But the look in his eyes said it all. He didn't think I was doing enough. I lay in bed long after he'd fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling, feeling something shift inside me. This wasn't just about tonight. This was a pattern, and if something didn't change, it was only going to get worse. And I was right. Over the next 2 years, what started as the occasional dig turned into a constant hum in our relationship. Michael's little jabs at my contributions became more frequent, less subtle. Once I tried to talk about our finances. I'd done some research and wanted to suggest a few changes to how we were investing. But before I could even finish my sentence, he cut me off, eyes still glued to his phone. "I've got the money stuff covered," he said. "You just focus on keeping the house nice." He said it like I was doing something small, like managing our entire home, keeping track of our calendar, planning every meal, remembering every birthday and event. That invisible work that keeps everything from falling apart wasn't worth real acknowledgement. But deep down I knew better. I was holding everything together, even if no one else saw it. At first, Michael managed our finances like a team effort. But over time, it turned into something way more controlling. He started giving me a fixed monthly allowance for the house, and would question pretty much anything I bought that didn't line up with what he thought was important. Meanwhile, I had this little online business that had started out as just handmade cards, but it had grown. I was now creating custom digital marketing templates, and clients were slowly finding me. It wasn't huge money yet, but it was steady and it felt like mine. One evening, as I was working on a client design, Michael glanced at my screen and gave this dismissive laugh. "Your little website thing is cute," he said. "But let's be honest, it's pocket change compared to what real businesses make." It hurt. A lot. But I didn't stop. After he'd go to bed, I'd stay up working, learning, improving, growing my skills one project at a time. Then in April, he came home driving a brand new BMW. He'd traded in our perfectly good, reliable sedan. I was shocked we hadn't talked about it at all. When I asked why he hadn't mentioned it, he brushed me off. "Mom helped with the down payment," he said. "She thinks I should be driving something more impressive." 2 months later, he dropped another surprise. He'd booked a luxury cruise for his mom's birthday. Another big expense, and again I only found out after it was already done. Around that time I started noticing little red flags. Closed door calls that sounded tense. Long nights in his home office. Screens minimized the second I walked in. One night, I overheard him arguing with someone about loan extensions and negotiating with creditors. When he finally came out, he looked exhausted. I gently asked, "Is everything okay at work?" He shot back, "Why wouldn't it be? Not everyone's content with mediocrity, Sarah." That hit hard. But instead of shrinking into silence like I used to, I got curious. That night, after he fell asleep, I checked his browser history. What I saw confirmed my gut feeling: searches about bankruptcy protection, how to hide financial losses from investors. Things were not okay. The next morning, I carefully offered to help. Maybe I could support him with a few ideas, even just a strategy or two. But he exploded. "What do you know about real business problems? You play around with templates on your little website. That's not the same." And that was it for me. I didn't cry this time. I didn't get angry. I just felt clear. That same day, I opened a bank account in my name only. From then on, every dollar I earned from my business went there, not into our joint account. I spent my evenings learning more about investing, business growth, and client management. I even enrolled in a few online courses to sharpen my skills. And quietly, in the background, I kept building. For myself. For my future. What Michael brushed off as just a little hobby was slowly becoming a real business. But he didn't see it. He was too wrapped up in his own growing issues to notice how much I was changing. I started connecting with other women building businesses, at first in online groups, then eventually at local meetups. I tell Michael I was heading to yoga, but really I was meeting with ambitious, driven people who inspired me. Every time I walked out of one of those meetups, I felt a little stronger. My emergency savings were growing, and with them so was my confidence. For the first time in forever, I felt like I had something that was mine. Not tied to Michael. Not about being someone's wife. Just me. Then came the dinner party, the one that changed everything. It was our 9th anniversary. Not that Michael remembered. He had invited his mom and 2 couples from work, saying it was some big networking opportunity. I spent the entire day cooking, decorating, making sure every little detail was perfect, hoping it would help him make the right impression. His mom, Eleanor, showed up early and wasted no time tearing apart my efforts. She moved my flower arrangement and criticized the table like she was teaching a kid how to set it properly. "Executives expect a certain level of sophistication, Sarah," she said. In that tone she always used when she wanted to sound helpful but was actually just condescending. When Michael walked in with his colleagues, I could tell something was off. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and his laugh had that tight, forced edge. As I moved between the kitchen and dining room, I caught bits and pieces of their conversation, talk about investors pulling out, setbacks, stress. During dinner, Eleanor, never one to miss a moment to show off, brought up family roles. "James, your wife is the CFO at her company, isn't she? Such a modern marriage." Then she turned to me with that icy smile. "Sarah here has chosen a more traditional path. Someone has to keep the home running, right?" I felt my face flush, but I kept smiling and serving. Grace under pressure, I was good at that. Thankfully, James's wife chimed in kindly. "Honestly, running a home takes as much work as running a department." I always say I have 2 full-time jobs. But before I could even thank her, Eleanor kept going. Well, sure, but there's a difference between contributing and consuming, don't you think? She waved her hand dramatically at the room. Michael provides such a beautiful home. All these lovely things. It must be hard, being the only one bringing in money, darling. She looked at Michael with this over-the-top sympathy, like she was comforting a hero. That moment felt like it hung in the air forever, like a trap I didn't see coming until it had already snapped shut. Michael glanced around the dinner table, then locked eyes with his mother. What he said next changed everything between us. Well, Sarah's basically useless when it comes to money. All she ever does is spend, she never earns. It hit me like someone had punched me right in the chest. The room didn't go silent instead. It filled with this slow, echoing laughter. Eleanor chuckled first, then after a beat, even Michael's coworkers joined in. All while I stood there, holding dessert plates that suddenly felt like they weighed 100 pounds. Then he added, like he wasn't done yet. At least she keeps the house looking nice. His mom gave him this smug little nod of approval, like she'd been waiting for him to say it. And me? I somehow still managed to serve dessert. I don't even remember how I was moving on autopilot, my brain spinning with shock and shame. The rest of the night felt like I was just floating through it, smiling and nodding while something deep inside me started to break open. On the drive home, after dropping Eleanor at her hotel, the silence in the car was suffocating. I couldn't even look at him. When we got inside, he loosened his tie like nothing had happened. Mom was just joking, Sarah. You're so sensitive. No, I'm sorry. No recognition that he'd humiliated me in front of everyone. Nothing. You called me useless, I said quietly. My voice was calm, way steadier than I felt. You did that in front of your coworkers. In front of your mother. You turned me into a joke. He rolled his eyes. Not even angry, just tired of me, like I was the one making a scene. It was just dinner talk. You always take things too seriously. And then he walked upstairs. No discussion. No care. Just left me standing there alone in the middle of our living room. Something inside me shifting so sharply, I could physically feel it. That night, I laid there beside him, wide awake, while he slept peacefully like nothing had happened. My tears slid quietly into my hair, and I just stared up at the ceiling, feeling everything and nothing at the same time. But somewhere in those long, quiet hours, something clicked into place. It was like a light finally turned on inside me. I made a silent promise. I will never let him or anyone else decide what I'm worth ever again. The version of me who stayed small to make him feel big? She was gone. And when the morning sun crept through the curtains, I didn't just wake up, I rose with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. A fire. A focus. A quiet, powerful knowing. I'll show them what useless really looks like. While Michael snored away in bed, I was up with a notebook, sketching out a game plan I kept tucked away in a box of old craft supplies, stuff he never bothered to touch. First step? I dove into researching business coaches. That's when I found Diane Mercer. She used to be a big deal in the tech world and now helps women turn their ideas into real thriving businesses. I used money from a secret savings stash to book a session with her. Told Michael I was heading to some free home organization workshop. He didn't ask questions. Diane didn't waste time sugarcoating anything. Your product's good, she said, straight to the point. But your pricing is rookie level. And you don't actually have a business, just a hobby that makes money. Sitting there in her sleek downtown office, I didn't feel judged. For once, someone was looking at my work like it actually mattered. Like it had real potential. That day, we built a 6-month plan to take my little side hustle and turn it into a full-on business. I'm talking a total makeover, branding, pricing, marketing, the works. From that point on, I used every free moment Michael wasn't around to build my dream. Sometimes I'd sneak out of bed at 5 a.m. to get a few hours in before he woke up. Other nights, I'd stay up working long after he'd gone to sleep. I turned my craft room into a secret office but kept it messy enough that it still looked like a hobby zone to him. Whenever he asked what I was up to, I kept it vague. Just playing around with some design stuff. Or working on a new template idea. The same kind of comments that used to make him tune out instantly. And that was exactly what I needed. My first big client came through Diane. A startup needed a full digital marketing package, and the project paid more than I'd made in the last 6 months combined. When that first deposit hit my business account, I stared at the screen like I couldn't believe it was real. Then I slapped a hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. That same night, Michael came home complaining about budget cuts at work, how his bonus might be smaller this year. The irony wasn't lost on me. As my business picked up, I started connecting with other women going through similar things. Smart, driven women who'd been told their ideas were cute or not serious enough. We met once a month at a coffee shop downtown, and those meetups quickly became my favorite part of the month. We swapped tips, shared wins, and lifted each other up. They just got it how heavy it can feel when the people closest to you don't believe in you. In that space, I started finding my voice again. First I was quiet, just listening. But slowly I started offering advice, sharing my own strategies. Felt good. Like I was stepping into who I was meant to be. Meanwhile, things weren't going great on Michael's end. He was stressed, short-tempered, snapping over dishes in the sink or how much detergent I was using. He started locking himself in his office for hours, muttering through tense calls. One night, after a particularly bad day, he said something about the company possibly restructuring some debt. When I asked what that meant for us, he waved me off. "It's business stuff, Sarah. You don't need to worry about it." That old dismissive tone, the one I'd gotten used to over the years, didn't just sting this time. It lit a fire. I nodded, but inside I knew I was done being brushed off. By the 4th month of my quiet little business transformation, I'd hired 2 part-time freelancers to help manage the workload. We worked together remotely, all while I kept up the illusion at home. Michael still thought I was just crafting. In reality, I was juggling multiple clients, including 3 mid-sized companies and a bunch of smaller ones. I scheduled everything carefully, carving out time wherever I could. Then one day, I got an email that made my heart race. A well-known lifestyle brand wanted to talk about a potential contract. I couldn't risk Michael overhearing, so I took the call in my car, parked 2 blocks away from our house. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, practically buzzing with excitement, trying to keep my voice steady. And as the money in my business account kept climbing, I couldn't help but notice so did Michael's stress over our finances. He started paying closer attention to our spending, questioning grocery bills, suggesting we cut back on little things. Meanwhile, the wild part? He had no idea. He'd sit there complaining about how everything was getting more expensive, all while unknowingly benefiting from my financial help. What started out as a mission to prove him wrong slowly became something deeper. I found myself actually loving the work I was doing. It wasn't just about showing Michael I could do it, it was about discovering that I wanted to, that I was capable, that I was building something real. One night, while reviewing my quarterly growth numbers, which were steadily climbing, it hit me I wasn't growing this business out of anger anymore. I was growing it because it made me proud. Felt good. Felt like me. By the time our 10th anniversary came around, another date, he completely forgot our careers had taken very different paths. My business was thriving. His wasn't. He finally admitted that his company was in serious trouble. I started noticing little things, calls from unfamiliar numbers that he'd take behind closed doors, the way his confident energy seemed to fade. That swagger he once carried? Gone. Replaced by stress, silence, and distraction. His mom, Eleanor, started showing up more often, supposedly to help him through the rough patch. But honestly, it just felt like she was there to remind him of everything he hadn't accomplished. One morning over breakfast, she casually said, "Your father had built his 2nd company by your age." Ouch. Michael didn't say anything, just clenched his jaw and changed the subject. Watching the way they interacted, I finally saw it. The same pressure and judgment that had slowly seeped into our marriage all these years. He was trying harder and harder to impress her, buying a flashy watch we couldn't afford, making fancy dinner reservations we had no business paying for, talking about luxury vacations we'd take once this all blows over. It was exhausting to watch, and you could tell it was eating away at him. One night, after what was clearly a rough day, he finally brought it up. "We need to talk about cutting back on expenses," he said, avoiding eye contact and pouring himself a heavy glass of whiskey. I nodded, keeping my face calm. I'd been waiting for this moment for months. "Oh, what kind of cutbacks are you thinking?" I asked. He started listing things that to him seemed unnecessary. My yoga classes, which I actually hadn't gone to in forever, our organic grocery delivery, which I had been paying for by the way, And our housekeeper, another expense I'd quietly taken on. I could hear Eleanor's voice in every word he said, her priorities, her judgments. The next day, she showed up unannounced with a smile and a box of old family photos she'd had digitized. But that wasn't the real reason she came. Over coffee she dropped the act. "Michael mentioned you'll be making some changes around here," she said, her eyes scanning the kitchen. "I've always believed women should know how to run a home efficiently. My generation knew how to stretch a dollar." I knew that tone. I'd heard it for years. But this time it didn't sting the way it used to. Not after everything I'd built in secret. I just smiled, thanked her, and steered the conversation somewhere else. The shift in me was obvious and it caught her off guard. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. And honestly, that felt better than any argument ever could. About 2 weeks later, the full weight of Michael's work problems finally showed. He'd been expecting a promotion to department director, something practically promised to him, but it never came. That evening he walked through the door looking pale, like all the air had been knocked out of him. The usual confidence he wore like armor? Gone. Later that night I found him alone in his office, buried in paperwork, his head in his hands. For a second that familiar urge to comfort him crept in the way I used to without thinking. But instead I just stood there and asked gently, "Is there anything I can do?" He let out a bitter little laugh. "Unless you can magically pull $80,000 out of nowhere to cover what I owe." Not really. The number hit me hard. That was almost exactly what I had saved in my business account. I walked back to our room, my emotions tangled up in knots. One side of me, the part that still remembered every time he dismissed me, every time he made me feel small, felt a dark kind of satisfaction. But there was also this other part of me, softer maybe, that still cared for the man I once truly loved. 3 nights later, Michael finally broke. I walked into the kitchen around midnight and found him slouched over the table, papers everywhere, an empty glass next to him. No pretense this time. Just broken honesty. "I've been lying to you," he said, voice flat and tired. "The business is falling apart. I'm falling apart. We could lose the house." He couldn't even look at me as he explained it all: risky investments, loans piled on loans, credit cards maxed out. He'd kept it hidden behind his perfect image for so long. "I didn't want to worry you," he added. But we both knew it wasn't just that. He didn't want to look weak, especially not in front of his mom. And as I stood there listening to his mess unravel, I found myself standing at my own kind of crossroads. I could have told him right then about my business, the money, the success he never saw coming. I could have played the hero. But something in me said, wait. He needed to feel this, to understand it. The memory of that dinner party, the way he called me useless like it was a joke, still sat heavy in my chest. "We'll figure something out," I said. The words tasted strange coming out of my mouth. "But let's just get some sleep for now." That night, I lay awake while he slept beside me, finally quiet. And in the dark, I made my choice. I would help him. Not because he deserved it, but because I had loved him once. Because we had history. But I'd do it on my terms. On my timeline. He needed to learn something from all of this. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, right as I was wrapping up a contract with a big-name national client, the call came. Michael had been fired. Just like that, 10 years, and they let him go with 2 weeks' pay. His voice on the phone didn't sound like his. It was hollow, like he couldn't quite believe it. 2 weeks severance, he said. That's all I'm worth to them. I cut my workday short and drove home. When I got there, I found him still in the car, just sitting. Like he couldn't bring himself to walk through the door. When he finally looked at me, his face was different, worn out, defeated. "I don't know what to do," he whispered. And you could see how hard it was for him to even admit that. And just as I was about to say something, another car pulled up. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Eleanor's car already there. She'd rushed over the moment Michael called her before he even thought to tell me what was going on. What happened next felt like déjà vu. Instead of offering comfort or even just listening, Eleanor immediately took over like she always did. "We need to be practical," she said, planting herself at our kitchen table with a stack of notebooks and spreadsheets, ready to fix things in her usual cold, calculated way. "Sarah, you'll need to find a real job. Something with benefits. You're losing Michael's insurance," she declared like I wasn't already holding things together in ways neither of them ever noticed. It was obvious she still didn't believe I was contributing anything important to our lives. Years had passed, and her mindset hadn't changed one bit. Michael sat there nodding along like her sidekick. Every now and then, he'd glance at me with this half-hearted, guilty look, but he never once stepped in to correct her. Not when she dismissed me. Not when she acted like I didn't matter. Then came the next blow. "We should sell the house," Eleanor continued. "It was always too much for you too. Something smaller makes more sense, at least until Michael gets back on his feet." They talked about our future like I was just background noise. Like I didn't have a say in any of it. When I tried to speak up to offer a different perspective, she cut me off. "This isn't the time for naive optimism, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "We need real-world solutions from people with experience." That tone of hers, that superior, dismissive tone, felt so familiar it almost made me laugh. It was the same voice she'd used on me for years. After about 2 hours of being steamrolled, Michael finally dropped the line that sealed it. "Mom's right. If you'd been more helpful all these years, we might have more options now." He said it so casually, like it was just a fact. But the weight of those words, heavy. Still, oddly enough, I didn't feel hurt. Not this time. Just clear. I stood up slowly and said I needed a moment to think, then walked to my home office. Eleanor called after me. "This isn't the time to be sensitive, Sarah. We need to make decisions." Behind the closed door, I opened my laptop, and there it was, the confirmation email I'd been expecting. My latest client contract was finalized. It marked a new revenue level for my business. A big one. The timing? Honestly, kind of poetic. From the other room, I could hear their voices rise and fall. They were busy plotting a future I clearly wasn't invited to shape, tossing around ideas that included borrowing money from Eleanor, of course. When I finally returned to the kitchen, their plan was in place. Eleanor would help financially, but only if she had control over where we lived, how we spent money, and pretty much every decision in between. "This is the most sensible way forward," she said, barely hiding how pleased she was to be taking charge. Michael sat beside her looking deflated, like a man who'd quietly given up. "It's just for now," he told me, "until I get back on my feet." But the look in his eyes said something else entirely. I just nodded, calm, detached, watching them like I was seeing a scene from a movie I'd watched one too many times. "I need to make a few calls," I said softly, and slipped away again. I walked into my office, heart pounding just a little, and called my business manager. I told him exactly what I needed and asked him to send over a few key documents right away. That afternoon, while Michael and his mother Eleanor were busy planning out what our downsized life would look like, my phone buzzed with a news alert. It was the announcement I hadn't been allowed to share yet. My company had just been named one of the fastest-growing independent digital marketing firms in the region. And guess what? We'd officially hit mid-six figures in projected annual revenue. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. On the exact day Michael hit his lowest point professionally, my biggest win became public. I forwarded the article to my personal email and printed it, along with the documents my manager had sent over. I could feel a shift coming. This wasn't just about proving a point anymore, it was about reclaiming my place in a story I'd been written out of for far too long. I set a meeting for the next morning. Both Michael and Eleanor were asked to be there at 10 a.m. I told them we needed to talk about our financial future. Of course, Eleanor showed up early, 15 minutes early to be exact. She sat herself at the head of the dining table, pen in hand, acting like she was running a board meeting. Michael looked tired, like life had finally hit him hard. His eyes were dark underneath, and his clothes looked thrown on like he hadn't bothered trying. I walked in calmly, holding a leather portfolio, and something in my presence made them both pause. I sat down and said, "Before we go ahead with Eleanor's plan, I want to offer another option for how we move forward financially." Eleanor raised her eyebrows, clearly ready to shut me down. "Sarah, I appreciate your input, but this is going to take actual financial knowledge and real resources." I gently lifted my hand, signaling her to stop. Even I was surprised by the quiet confidence in that moment. "Please, let me finish." Then I opened the folder and slid the papers across the table. "This is the current financial statement for Miller Digital Solutions, my company. Last year, we brought in just over $600,000. The room went completely still. Michael blinked at the papers, then at me, his face flickering between confusion, disbelief, and something that looked a lot like respect. Eleanor snatched up the documents with a frown, probably expecting to find some kind of joke. But as she flipped through the verified statements and the professional valuation report, her whole expression changed. This can't be right," she finally muttered. For once, her voice had lost that sharp, in-control tone. "These numbers don't make sense." I smiled just a little and reached for my phone. "Would you like to call my business manager? Or my accountant? They'll be happy to confirm everything." Michael finally spoke, though it came out more like a whisper. "You've been running a real business? All this time?" I nodded, steady and sure. "For the past year, I've been turning what you all used to call my little hobby into a full-on company. I've got 11 employees now, and clients across 4 states. I slid the final document across the table toward Michael. It was a bank statement, one that clearly showed I had more than enough money to cover all his business debts right then if I wanted to. "I can pay off your creditors, Michael," I said calmly. "All of them. Today, if that's what it takes." The look on his face was something I'll never forget. Total shock mixed with confusion, guilt, maybe even a little shame. You could see the storm of emotions rolling through him. "You could have told me back when I first brought up the money problems," he said, almost whispering. I met his eyes. Steady, unapologetic. "Yeah, I could have," I replied. "Just like you could have taken my business seriously from the start. Just like you could have stopped yourself from calling me useless in front of your colleagues. And your mother." The silence that followed felt thick, heavy. We both knew what moment I was talking about, and so did Ella Laner. She was the first to recover, slipping into that polite, polished tone she always used to regain control. "Well," she said, trying to smile, "this is certainly unexpected, but I'm sure Michael's advice must have helped you along the way. He's always had such a strong business sense." It was almost funny. Almost. If it hadn't been so predictable. "Actually, Ella Laner," I said, turning to face her, "Michael had nothing to do with it. He never asked. Never cared. In fact, he spent most of his time brushing me off, calling it a hobby, remember?" Then I turned back to Michael. My voice softened just a little. "You never once asked to see my work. Not even once. In all these years." That truth seemed to land. His shoulders dropped slightly. The weight of it was real. I didn't think he started, then stopped. There wasn't really anything to say that would make it better. I straightened up, letting my voice take on that calm, confident tone I'd earned the right to own. "I'm more than willing to help with the finances," I told him. "But there will be conditions." Ella Laner bristled, her posture tightening like she couldn't believe I dare say that. "Conditions? After everything Michael's done for you?" That made me laugh. Not bitter, genuinely amused. "What exactly has he done for me?" I asked, looking her straight in the eye. "He dismissed me, undervalued me, publicly called me useless. Does that sound like support to you?" I turned to Michael, who looked honestly ashamed, and I appreciated that. "My conditions are simple," I said clearly. "From now on, this is a partnership. Equal say, equal respect, equal value. I'll clear the debts, but every financial decision going forward will be shared. And Ella Laner," I added, turning back to her, "you will no longer have a say in our marriage or our money. That chapter is closed." I let that sink in before finishing. "And most importantly, you both will recognize my success and everything I built while being ignored and dismissed." I looked at Michael again. "This isn't about payback," I said gently. "This is about building something real. Something based on mutual respect, which we should have had a long time ago." Ella Laner opened her mouth to argue, but Michael stopped her. Literally held up his hand to silence her. I had never seen him do that before. "She's right, Mom," he said quietly. "We've been wrong about Sarah. Completely wrong." Then he looked at me, really looked at me. Maybe for the first time in years. "I'm sorry," he said. "Truly sorry." Now those words didn't magically fix everything. They couldn't undo the years of being unseen. But it was a start. And as Ella Laner sat there, clearly struggling to process this major shift in the way things had always been, Michael and I started building a new kind of understanding, one rooted in respect and recognition. It was long overdue. For the first time in our marriage, the power wasn't one-sided. And I wasn't asking for space at the table anymore. I was the table. It didn't happen out of revenge. It happened because I finally owned my power. 6 months after everything came crashing down after the truth rocked our marriage, Michael and I now sit across from each other at a brand new desk in a shared home office. It's more than just furniture. It's a sign that things between us have changed, not perfectly, but honestly. This journey, it's been anything but easy. There were setbacks. Old habits that tried to sneak back in. Hard talks that stretched way past midnight. At first, Michael didn't know who he was without the title of provider. His whole identity had been built on that. My success, while something I was proud of, shook him to his core. One night, he looked at me and said, "If I'm not the successful one, who even am I?" I looked him in the eye and told him the truth. "You're still the man I fell in love with. The one who used to be full of ideas and ambition. You just lost track of him for a while." Meanwhile, my business kept growing. We recently expanded into 2 new states and launched a niche service line. And yeah, I know the irony. The whole thing started because he brushed me off, made me feel small. Funny how pain can push you harder than praise ever could. Not that I'd recommend it as a motivational strategy. As for Michael, he's finding his way again. With some of the financial pressure lifted, he's gone back to what really lights him up, helping small businesses go green. He started a consulting gig that actually makes him feel good about what he does. Turns out, fulfillment looks a lot different than a fancy title. These days, we make money decisions as a team. It's all transparent, all respectful. We've both had to unlearn some things about power, partnership, and what it means to show up for each other. And then there's Eleanor. Let's just say, her influence isn't what it used to be. She tried to spin my success like it somehow came from Michael's guidance, but facts are stubborn. She still visits, but the dynamic has shifted. Big time. The last time she made one of her usual snide comments about working wives neglecting the home. Michael cut her off. He said, "Mom, Sarah's business sense is something I truly admire. I've learned more from her this year than I ever did in the corporate world." That moment? I'll never forget it. Healing our relationship meant we both had to face some hard truths. For Michael, it meant realizing just how deeply he had dismissed me, not just my work, but my worth. "I didn't even see it," he told me once. "I was so obsessed with living up to my mom's version of success, I never stopped to question how we were defining yours. And me? I had to own my part too. The bitterness I carried. The secret satisfaction I felt when he hit rock bottom. The fact that I kept my success hidden for so long, partly because I wanted that big, dramatic, I told you so moment. I wanted you to hurt like I did," I admitted once. And that's not something I'm proud of. But here's the real shift, the one that changed everything. My self-worth? It's not tied to someone else's approval anymore. Not his. Not hers. Not anyone's. Over the past few years, building my business has changed more than just my bank account. It's completely changed me. That confidence I've grown, it spills into every part of my life now. And one of the most meaningful things that's come from all this is being able to support other women, especially those trying to grow something big while dealing with families that just don't get it. Helping them see their own strength and believe in what they're capable of. Honestly, it lights me up. Just last week, Michael and I kicked off something new together, a workshop series for couples navigating career changes and the sometimes messy power shifts that come with them. Our story, with all its rough edges, missteps, and lessons, has become something we now use to help others. It's part warning, part inspiration. While we were finishing up the workshop material, Michael looked at me and said, "It's kind of wild. We're actually building that empire we always dreamed of in college." And I smiled and said, "Yeah, just not the way we thought we would. But that's life, right? Growth rarely shows up in the package you expected." The biggest thing I've learned on this journey? No one gets to define your value, not even someone you love. Being underestimated turned out to be a strange kind of gift. It pushed me to dig deep and uncover strengths I might have never tapped into otherwise. The real freedom wasn't just about money. It was about finally feeling free to define success my way. Sometimes I think back to that one dinner party. The night I stood there holding dessert plates frozen, while my husband called me useless, in front of everyone. That version of me feels like a different person now. Like someone I knew once but don't recognize anymore. If I could go back and speak to her, I'd say this. The people who underestimate you, they don't define you. They just show you where their limits are. Your value was never up for them to decide. So let me ask you, has someone ever made you feel small, even when their opinion meant everything to you at the time? What did you do with that? Did it shrink you, or did it spark something in you? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Truly. And if my words feel familiar, if my story reminds you of your own, please share this with someone who might need it today. Thanks for being here. And remember, you don't need anyone to validate your worth. It's already yours. All you have to do is claim it.